My daughter didn't talk to me for 12 years, but when I won $72 million, 0 cents lottery, she invited me to her Christmas party. I was tying the last bow on a small, carefully wrapped box when the phone rang. It was a soft, unexpected sound, like a ghost tapping on the window. I had not heard her voice in 12 years. 12 long winters, 12 quiet birthdays, 12 lonely Christmases spent writing cards that never got sent. And yet, when I saw her name flash on that tiny screen, my hand trembled like it still knew how to hope. "Mom," she said. Not Mother, not Mrs. Rose, just Mom. That word used to mean everything. Now it landed like ice in my lap. "I'm giving you a chance," she said, with a calm so practiced it sounded rehearsed. "A chance to be forgiven. But if you want to come to my Christmas party, you'll have to bring $7,100,000, 0 cents with you. That's the cost of 12 years you left me alone, 12 years of abandonment." I opened my mouth, but no words came. She didn't wait. I heard her call out to someone in the room. Probably her husband. "Yeah, I told her," she said, her voice slightly muffled but still sharp as broken glass. "She better bring it all. Don't just ask for $7,100,000, 0 cents. Ask for everything. She owes me. That woman gave me nothing. She didn't raise me. She barely even looked at me growing up. She was just the baby machine. And now she thinks she can live out her twilight years in peace?" She snorted. "Hell no. If anyone deserves that money, it's me. I'm her daughter, her only child. She should be grateful I'm even letting her in the door." Then, more quietly, I heard her mutter, "She's just a bitter old witch who doesn't know when to die." I did not realize my hand had gone limp until the porcelain teacup slipped from my fingers and shattered on the kitchen floor. Hot tea soaked into the towel I had laid on the counter to dry cookies. My knees buckled slightly. I leaned on the edge of the table. Across from me, the photo of Henry, my late husband, stared back from its wooden frame, his smile as warm as the last time he kissed my forehead. In that moment, the glass over his face glistened, as if it too were crying. 12 years. Not a single phone call. Not a letter. Not even a note when her father passed. I had begged her to come, just to see him one last time. He had whispered her name before the machines went silent. But she never showed. She had told her husband, and later even her mother-in-law, that she had no parents, that she was orphaned by shame. She said our house was embarrassing, that we smelled poor, that I talked too slowly, that I dressed too plainly, that I was stuck in the past, like some half-dead ghost still clutching sewing needles and old love songs. I remembered the last time I saw her eyes. It was in the hospital hallway, after she signed the release forms that put her father in a care facility he never came back from. I had followed her to the elevator, pleading. "He needs you," I had whispered, breathless. "He doesn't have much time." She had turned to me, eyes cold as coin. "I don't need this guilt trip," she said. "You two already ruined enough of my life. Do me a favor, disappear." And I did. I disappeared into library stacks and garden soil, into bread dough and jigsaw puzzles, into books Henry left behind and letters he never sent, into the silence no one noticed. I became what she asked for, a shadow with no demands, no voice, no presence. Just a name on a birth certificate and a ghost in an old house at the edge of town. Until the lottery. It was an accident, really. I had gone to the grocery store to buy canned peaches for the community food drive. I had misread the labels, mistook one ticket for a discount slip. The cashier had to explain I had purchased a lottery scratcher by mistake. I was going to toss it in the trash, but something, call it curiosity or boredom, made me scratch it in the car. The numbers stared back at me, mocking my breath. I blinked. 3 times, then once more, just to be sure. $7.2 million. I did not scream. I did not jump. I sat there in the parking lot of Hollow Pines Grocery, with the heater running and my fingers shaking around the wheel. For the first time in years, I thought about what I wanted, not what I needed to survive, but what I truly wanted. I never told anyone. Not a soul. Not even the girl at the church who sometimes helped me carry groceries. I signed the form under an old trust Henry and I had created for emergencies. I thought that would be enough to keep the press away, but of course, The local paper caught wind of it. Mysterious widow of Hollow Pines wins big. The headline read, "No name, no photo, just a blurred address in the background of the image." It was enough. She called the next day. Now here I stood, surrounded by wrapping paper and untouched cookies, with my daughter's voice still ringing in my ears like a curse from some lifetime I never wanted to return to. The smell of burnt tea and peppermint filled the air, and somewhere behind me, the echo of Henry's silence grew louder. I stared at the phone for a long time after the call ended. My hand hovered over the receiver like it still had something to say, but there was nothing left. She wanted money. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, not family. She wanted me to buy my way into her Christmas party. She wanted to be paid for the years she erased me. She thought silence had made me weak. But silence does not mean surrender. Silence is where steel is forged. And this time, I would not show up empty-handed. I was never afraid of hard work. In fact, I wore exhaustion like a second skin, one that fit tighter with every year of motherhood. Back then, I juggled 2 jobs, cleaning offices at dawn and folding linens at a motel by dusk. In between, I was stitching up the frayed hem of my daughter's favorite church dress, mending zippers on her school backpack, and riding my rusted bicycle across town just to afford a carton of eggs that were not expired. My fingers stayed rough from detergent, my back bent from floors scrubbed for families who barely looked me in the eye. But I did it all with a kind of quiet pride, because I had a daughter, and a husband who came home every night smelling of cedar and turpentine from his workshop. Henry was not a rich man, but he was good. He had a way of making any room feel warmer just by walking in. He called me Rose, even when my hands were blistered and my hair hadn't been washed in 3 days. He always said, "You bloom even when the world forgets to water you." I remember one winter when our water heater broke and we could not afford to fix it. Henry boiled pots of water over the stove and filled the bathtub so our daughter could bathe without shivering. He never complained, not once. He died on a Thursday. No warning, no last words, just a hand pressed to his chest and a slump against the porch railing. I was the one who found him. My scream must have startled the crows from the tree line behind the house, because they scattered into the sky like ashes. The ambulance came, but it was too late. It was always too late for good men like him. After the funeral, I stood in our bedroom, staring at his empty side of the bed, listening to the clock tick like a countdown. That was the first night I truly felt fear, not for myself, but for what would become of our daughter without her father's calm to balance my worry. She was 16 then, sharp-tongued, moody, restless. I blamed the grief at first, but there was something else growing inside her, a bitterness I did not recognize, and behind it, the whispering voice of my mother-in-law. That woman never liked me, said I was too quiet, too plain, called me the help, even after I became her daughter-in-law. After Henry died, she moved into our house under the pretense of helping with the bills. What she really did was chip away at whatever bond remained between me and my daughter. I overheard it one day. "She's not a real woman," my mother-in-law said. "She's a washer, a maid, a baby maker. That's all your mother is. You want to live like her, scrubbing someone else's mess until your knees give out?" I should have stopped it. I should have spoken up. But I was tired and scared, and I thought, naively, that love would be stronger than poison. It was not. By 18, my daughter had learned to look through me, not at me. She refused to eat meals I cooked, rolled her eyes when I asked about school, stayed out late and came home smelling like perfume I could never afford. I tried. Lord knows I tried. I left notes on her pillow, bought her a pair of second-hand heels for prom, saved up for months to get her a refurbished laptop. She never said thank you. She never asked me why my hands bled at night or why my shoes had holes. She only said one thing over and over: "Why can't you be like other moms?" I did not know what that meant. I was the mom who walked her to kindergarten in the rain, who sat through every choir recital, even when she sang off-key, who packed extra sandwiches in case she got hungry after school. But in her eyes, I was never enough. The final fracture came when Henry's health declined years after his first heart attack. He needed care, medication, comfort. I thought, foolishly, that our daughter, now a married woman with a car, a job, and her own apartment, would come visit. Instead, she told the doctor to put her father in a state-run nursing home. I stood in the hallway, clutching his discharge papers, too numb to argue. I begged her, "Just come see him, once. He keeps asking for you." She adjusted her sunglasses, checked her phone, and said, "I do not have time for your little guilt games. I have a family now. I cannot let your dysfunction poison it." I stared at her, unable to speak. She looked at me like I was nothing. And then she said it. "I have not had parents since the day I realized I was embarrassed by the house I grew up in, by you, by all of it." Then she walked away. That night, Henry cried in his sleep, and the next morning he would not wake up. I signed his death certificate alone. She never came to the burial. I had to pay the church organist in crocheted scarves, just so they would play the hymn he loved. After that, I stopped writing to her, stopped calling. I erased her name from the Christmas card list. Every picture of her I kept was packed into a shoebox and pushed into the attic, where dust could do what time had not, make her fade. But of course she came back, not for love, not for closure, not for her father's memory or my pain. She came for money. 12 years of silence, and now she expected a check. She thought I had always been weak, that I would fold, like I did when she slammed her bedroom door, that I would apologize, like I did when she cursed me under her breath, that I would show up with a checkbook and tears and let her spit in my face again. But she did not know the woman I had become in her absence. She did not know that silence, too, can sharpen a person, and that grief, when it has burned through your bones, leaves behind a spine made of iron. 12 years is a long time to go without a birthday cake, without a phone call, without someone saying your name out loud in a way that does not sound like it hurts them to remember you. For 12 years, I lived in a house that got quieter with every passing season. No footsteps, no laughter, no slam doors, just the hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of wind through the thin kitchen window. I stopped expecting visitors. I learned to cook for one, to fold blankets that no one else used, to sit in silence and listen to the clock count the seconds that no one ever called. Every Christmas, I lit a single candle and placed it in the window, like a lighthouse, in case anyone, decided to come home. But no one did. I wrote letters anyway. One each year, always in December. Always with a shaky hand and a hope I hated myself for still having. I told her how the lilacs bloomed too early that spring, how Henry's tools still sat on the garage shelf untouched, how the neighbor's dog had puppies and I thought she might like one. I signed them, always, "With love, Mom." I mailed them to her last known address. Each one came back, returned to sender, sometimes unopened, sometimes the envelope torn, like someone had ripped it just to make sure there was no money inside. I stopped writing after the 5th letter. I still remember the last one. My pen had leaked on the paper, the ink blotting out the word forgive. I took it as a sign. The world around me did not stop just because she erased me. I still had to water the garden, pay the bills, get groceries. My knees hurt more in the winter. My hands curled tighter with arthritis. I did not tell anyone. I did not want to be anyone's burden. I had already been called that once too often. Then came the rain. It was a Tuesday, I think. I had gone to Hollow Pines Grocery in my old beige raincoat, the one with the fraying pockets. I had 2 things on my list, milk and canned peaches. There was a sale that day, 4 cans for $2 if you had the weekly coupon. I could not find the coupon in my purse. My eyesight had gotten worse. The glasses I used were scratched and missing a nose pad. I reached into the rotating stand by the counter and grabbed what I thought was the discount slip. It was not. It was a scratch-off ticket. The clerk, a boy no older than 16, laughed gently and said, "Ma'am, this one ain't for peaches." He winked, and I nearly put it back, but something about his grin made me smile for the first time in weeks. So I kept it. I scratched it at home, on the kitchen table, next to Henry's photo and my half-knitted shawl. The numbers didn't make sense at first. I thought I had misread them. I got out the magnifying glass. 7, 2, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I ran a finger down the barcode twice, then again. I did not scream. I did not jump up or call the news. I just sat there, staring at that little piece of cardboard like it was a portal to another life. $7.2 million. I didn't even know what to feel. What does a woman with no one buy with millions of dollars? A larger empty house? A grander silence? I tucked the ticket into Henry's toolbox and spent 3 days pretending it had not happened. I watered the plants, fed the birds, read old novels I had memorized, but it was there, humming beneath the floorboards, like electricity. Eventually I made an appointment with the state office. I used the old trust account Henry and I had created back when we still dreamed of sending our daughter to college. I claimed the winnings anonymously, or so I thought. The paperwork did not include my name in the headlines, but it listed the zip code, and a blurry background photo taken by a local journalist trying to find the mystery winner had caught a sliver of my white picket fence. What I hadn't realized was that a local freelance reporter had been lurking near the regional lottery claim office, camera in hand, snapping photos of anyone walking in or out. He caught the back of my coat, the curve of my porch in a background shot, and the zip code matched. It was enough for the town gossip to put 2 and 2 together. It was enough. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was her. I knew it before I even picked up. I could feel the past reaching for my throat again. The message came as a text, short, smug, Mom. I heard the news. God really does give people a second chance to make things right. Let's meet this Christmas. I'll host. You can bring, say 7.1 million? Call it a peace offering. There was a winking emoji at the end. As if it were a joke. As if demanding nearly every cent of my winnings, after 12 years of silence, was just another funny thing daughters say to mothers they left behind. I sat there holding that phone, the same way I once held her tiny foot in the delivery room, amazed something so small could break your heart so easily. It had rained again that morning. The gutters dripped like ticking clocks. I thought about replying. I thought about screaming. Instead, I just stared. The candle I had lit for her every year sat unburned on the windowsill. I blew it out. There would be no light waiting for her this Christmas. Only truth. I called her the next morning. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the weight of the choice I was making. I had spent 12 years in silence, 12 years refusing to pick up that phone, refusing to beg, refusing to crawl. But I dialed anyway, not because I believed she had changed, but because something in me needed to see the fire, to know it still burned. She answered on the second ring. Mom? Her voice was sugar slick, like syrup over broken glass. I was just thinking about you. I knew you'd call. I smiled the way people do at funerals, tight, polite, full of grief you are not allowed to show. I got your message, I said. Christmas sounds lovely. She launched into a practiced spiel about peace, family, forgiveness, how time healed all wounds, how we were overdue for a reunion, how her children deserved to know their grandmother now that she was stable. I nodded through the call, gave soft yeses and hesitant laughs, the way a woman does when she is trying to remember the sound of her own daughter's voice without the poison in it. But my chest beat like a war drum, because I knew she was not calling to reconnect. She was baiting a hook. She asked for my address to send an invitation, but I knew she already had it. She asked about my health, if I would need assistance getting around, then slipped in, God forbid something happens before you can finalize your will. She laughed afterward, but it was the kind of laugh you hear in a courtroom. I told her I was touched, that I would be there, that I was looking forward to it. Then I hung up and I cried. Not because I missed her, but because the girl I used to know, the baby I once rocked through fever nights, the little girl who used to sing off-key in the kitchen while I made cornbread, she really was gone. In her place stood a stranger with my cheekbones and none of my heart. Later that evening, I went to the local post office to check my box. Inside, along with catalogs I never ordered, was a crisp cream envelope. My name was written in her handwriting, round and sharp like everything she had ever said to me. Inside was the invitation. There would be a catered dinner, a photo backdrop, a guest list of important people from her husband's work, and a suggested attire guide. Winter elegance. At the bottom in gold script were the words, "Family is forever." It made my stomach turn. I had barely returned home when the phone rang again. I didn't answer, but I picked up the receiver just enough to hear the line click. I recognized the voices immediately. She had not realized I was there. "It's fine, Mom," my daughter was saying, this time to her mother-in-law. "She's coming. I told you. I just have to smile long enough to get her to sign something." A pause. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's always been a bit slow." Another pause. A laugh. "She still thinks this is about forgiveness. Honestly, it's pathetic." Then her voice dropped lower, like she was sharing a secret. "Look, all I care about is the money. If she brings it, I'll let her see the kids. Once, for the photo op. But that's it." My breath caught. Her mother-in-law responded, tone bored and cruel. "Well, if she wants to be part of this family, she better act like it. Money buys a seat at this table, otherwise she can stay in whatever nursing home she was rotting in." Then came the dagger. "I already told the kids," my daughter said. "She's not really their grandmother. She's just someone I used to know. I mean, we can't let them get attached. She's old, and besides, who wants to be hugged by a witch?" They laughed. I held the receiver to my chest, afraid the sound of my heart breaking would carry down the line. And then she said it. "She has to bring the money. That's the price. 7.1 million. Or she can crawl back to whatever grave she crawled out of. I won't have my children calling a washed-up, bitter old maid grandma. If she wants a title, she can pay for it." I hung up. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the wallpaper Henry and I had hung 30 years ago. One corner had started to peel. I had always meant to fix it. The silence wrapped around me like a shroud. But it did not suffocate me. No, it steadied me. Because now I was sure. There was no misunderstanding, no room for redemption, no ambiguity. She had not just erased me, she had replaced me. In her world, I was not a mother. I was a transaction. I was leverage, a dollar sign with wrinkles. But she had forgotten something. I was still her mother, and I still knew how to protect what mattered. She wanted me to bring money. She wanted me to crawl. She wanted me to beg to be loved. But I would not beg. I would bring something far more powerful than money. I would bring the truth. The morning after I heard her plan, I walked down to the bank with a coat too thin for December and a mind sharper than it had been in years. The air was brittle with frost, but I did not shiver. My legs hurt with every step, but I did not pause. I walked with a purpose that did not belong to someone my age. It belonged to someone who had finally, after a lifetime of silence, decided to be heard. Inside the bank, the clerk smiled politely and offered me a seat. I asked to speak to the manager. She came out, a kind woman, with silver in her hair and no judgment in her eyes. I handed her a folded sheet of paper, carefully printed the night before on my old typewriter. It was my new will. "I would like this notarized today," I said. "And witnessed." She read the first line and blinked. "You're donating everything?" I nodded. "All of it?" "To a cause that understands what being forgotten feels like." She did not ask further. She nodded and began the paperwork. It took 2 hours. I signed my name 5 times, each stroke steady, each letter deliberate. It was the most powerful I had felt since the day I gave birth to the daughter who would one day call me a stranger. The inheritance clause was simple. Upon my death, the entire lottery sum, along with my home and remaining possessions, would go to the Hollow Pines Foundation, a small but mighty organization that cared for abandoned children and aging women cast aside by their family. It was the same place that once helped me find part-time work after Henry passed. They had no idea who I really was back then. Just another old woman in need of purpose. After that, I walked across town to the legal aid office and requested a consultation. A young paralegal named Naomi helped me file an advance directive and a financial protection affidavit, declaring my intention to protect myself against undue influence or coercion. She offered to call someone for me, a family member, she said, but I told her gently, "They are why I am here." Next, I made one final stop. It had been decades since I last stepped foot inside the newsroom of the Hollow Pines Gazette, but this time I came with a name and a mission. I asked for Evelyn Monroe. She had been a junior reporter when Henry saved her life. It happened late one night when her car broke down outside town and he pulled over, risking his own safety to help a stranger in the dark. She had written him a thank you letter afterward, then kept in touch with me long after he passed. We had not spoken in years, but when she saw me standing there, she recognized me instantly. "I need your help," I said. She listened to every word. Her eyes grew wider, then sharper. I told her about the money, the Christmas invitation, the eavesdropped conversation, the plan to extort and humiliate me. "And what do you want from me?" she asked. I reached into my purse and handed her a neatly folded press pass, hers old and worn. "I want you to come to the party," I said, "as a guest, quietly, observe everything, take notes, take photos, and when it's time, tell the truth." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll be there." We hugged. Hers was the first warm embrace I had felt in months. Back home, I went through Henry's old chest and pulled out a small wooden box he had carved by hand. It was meant to hold his cufflinks, but he never got around to using it. I lined the inside with velvet and placed the newly notarized will within. I added a letter to my daughter, sealed and addressed in her name. On top, I placed a photo of Henry holding our daughter the day she was born. That photo had never left my nightstand, until now. I wrapped the box with care, tied it with a satin ribbon, and labeled it, "To be opened when you remember who I was." Then I placed it in a paper bag and set it aside with my best wool coat. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window and watched the street lights blink against the fog. I thought of all the things I wanted to say but never had, all the apologies I had whispered to myself that were never owed, all the tears I had dried alone because pride would not let me call anyone. I was not going to that Christmas party to beg. I was not going to plead or explain or correct her version of the past. I was going to bear witness. I was going to stand in the same room as the people who thought they had broken me and show them what dignity looks like when it stands tall. Before going to bed, I looked at Henry's picture and whispered, "It's time." He did not answer. He never did. But somehow I felt less alone. As I turned out the light, I said to myself, not with anger, but with clarity, I am not getting revenge. I am restoring balance. Not to prove I was good, but to remind them that I existed. And I am still here. The house was 3 times the size of the one I had raised her in. Brick pillars, wrought iron gates, lights so bright they made the cold December evening look like a movie set. When I stepped out of the cab, the valet stared at me like he was unsure I belonged, his eyes trailing from my scuffed shoes to my gray wool coat. I handed him the simple paper bag I carried and nodded. Inside, the warmth did not reach me. It was the kind of heat generated by money, not love. The first face I saw was her mother-in-law's. She wore a red silk dress with a diamond brooch the size of a sugar cube. Her smile was cold and immediate. "Oh, you made it," she said with a tone that dripped condescension. "We were worried you might get lost. It's been, what, a decade?" I didn't answer. In the hallway, voices echoed, guests laughing, glasses clinking. Everything smelled of pine, cinnamon, and forced affection. They had decorated the place like a holiday catalog. Golden wreaths, perfectly symmetrical stockings, LED candles flickering in artificial peace. My daughter emerged from the dining room in a silver gown that shimmered like ice. Her face was pulled tight with powder and smiles. "Mother," she said, just loud enough for others to hear, "how lovely you look." It was not a compliment. I smiled, steady. "Merry Christmas!" A little girl peeked around her leg. Her hair was in curls, cheeks flushed from too much sugar or too little affection. "Who's that, Mommy?" she asked. And my daughter, without hesitation, replied, "Just someone I used to know, a woman who once left a little girl all alone, like a stray dog on the street." My fingers tightened on the paper bag. The girl blinked, confused. "But she looks like you." My daughter laughed lightly and ushered the child away. "That's just a coincidence." Then she turned to me and whispered, "Do not make a scene. Let's get this over with." She led me past the glittering living room and into a small office lined with books I knew she never read. 2 men in suits sat at a mahogany desk. One of them stood up and extended a hand. "Mrs. Avery," he said, "I'm David Bishop, Family Legal Counsel. We've prepared a few documents. Nothing complicated, just some clarification for estate and financial transition. There was a leather folder on the desk, already open. Inside was a contract, a formal agreement requesting the full and immediate transfer of all lottery winnings and assets in exchange for, how did they phrase it? Familial reconciliation and limited access to minor grandchildren at future events at Ho's discretion. I stared at the words like they were a foreign language, then looked at my daughter. Her arms were folded, her eyes dared me. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my glasses, and took a seat. Slowly, I ran a finger down the clause labeled Transfer of Trust. Would I be allowed to hold my grandchildren? I asked. She smirked. For pictures, yes, I nodded. Would I be allowed to visit? She shrugged. That depends on your behavior. I kept reading. And if I refuse to sign? I asked. She leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. Then you can take your millions and rot alone in that shack you call a home. No one wants you. No one missed you. The only reason you're here is because you got lucky, and luck runs out. The lawyer cleared his throat. We're not trying to create pressure here. This is a gesture of goodwill. I cut him off. My hand was steady now. I looked her in the eyes. Do you remember when you were 11? I asked. She rolled her eyes. Barely. You had a fever, a bad one. We had no insurance. Your father was out of work. I spent 2 days in line at the blood bank selling plasma. I fainted in the hallway from dehydration, but I came home with the medicine. I held you all night until your fever broke. She blinked. Of course you don't remember, I said gently, because children don't remember the nights their parents bleed quietly, but they never forget the one time they think you weren't there. She scoffed. That's your problem. You think suffering earns you love. It doesn't. You should have done more, should have become more, but you didn't. And now that you're finally worth something, you act like we owe you. She pointed to the folder. Sign it or leave. And then she smiled. So softly it stung. Right now, the only value you have is what's in your bank account. No one cares what you did 30 years ago. We care about now, and right now, I have a reputation. I have kids. I have a life. You're just a wrinkle in it. I stared at her. The little girl who once brought me dandelions in a chipped teacup was gone. In her place stood a woman I did not know. I reached into the paper bag and took out the small wooden box. I brought a gift, I said. She raised an eyebrow. What is it? The check? I opened the lid and turned it toward her. Inside was a folded document. A will. A new one that left everything, not just the lottery winnings, but the house, the savings, the land, to a foundation that cared for children who had no one. On top, a letter addressed to her, unopened, and a photo, her newborn self in Henry's arms, his eyes red from joy and exhaustion. She reached for it, but I pulled it back. No, I said. This is not for you. Not anymore. She laughed, uneasy now. You think this makes you noble? I stood. No, I think it makes me free, she scoffed. What, you're going to die and let strangers spend your money? I turned to leave. She called after me. This is why no one loves you. I paused in the doorway. Then, with my hand on the frame, I said, maybe, but at least I never sold love for a price tag. Outside the office, the party went on. Laughter, music, wine, but somewhere in the crowd, a camera clicked. Quiet. Precise. Evelyn Monroe, my old friend, now journalist, had been standing near the hallway, snapping photos, not of me, of the contract, of her smug expression, of the lawyer shifting nervously. She nodded to me as I passed. We had everything we needed, and tomorrow the world would know what happened behind the silver-plated doors of that picture-perfect Christmas party. I sat back down at the table. Her eyes were locked on the contract, jaw tight with anticipation. I could feel the heat radiating off her like a ticking bomb that thought it had already won. I took the pen from the attorney's hand and poised it above the page. Then I paused. Wait, I said, reaching into my purse. I brought my own copy. She frowned. What copy? I just want to make sure everything matches up. You know, for clarity. She rolled her eyes but nodded at the attorney to humor me. He stepped back. I slid a folder across the table. Inside it was a crisp, notarized document. My real will. It looked similar enough. Official seals, typewritten text, signatures. But instead of transferring assets to her or any family member, it listed a single beneficiary, Hollow Pines Home for Children. I handed it to the lawyer. Please review that. It should clear everything up. As he scanned it, his brows furrowed. My daughter leaned over to see, and then the color drained from her face. She grabbed it, eyes darting line by line. This isn't— It is, I said softly. It's my final will, everything I own. The winnings, the house, the land, the books, even the photos. All of it is going to children who have never known a family, and to elderly women who were tossed aside like I was. She slammed the paper onto the table. You can't do this. I already did. You said you came here to— I came here to say goodbye, I interrupted, and to make sure you finally saw who I've become. You called me a witch, so here I am, with a curse, one that reveals the truth. I stood up, opened the small box I had brought, and placed it in the center of the table. This, I said, is the legacy you rejected. She stared into the box, the photograph of her as a newborn in Henry's arms, the letter I had written her, and the legal proof that she would receive nothing. You think this makes you righteous, she hissed. You're just bitter. No, I said calmly. I'm done being bitter. This is not revenge. This is freedom. Behind us, the door creaked, and then a voice cut through the tense air. Excuse me, would anyone care to comment on this? It was Evelyn. She stepped inside, holding her phone, camera already recording. You said you were just an old friend, my daughter sputtered. I am, Evelyn replied. And I am also a journalist, and what I witnessed tonight is more than a private disagreement. It's coercion, it's moral blackmail, and now— She turned the camera slightly, catching the contract still on the desk. It's public. My daughter lunged for the phone, but Evelyn was faster. You'll regret this, she screamed. Evelyn smiled. You already do. I walked out of the room, past guests who had grown quiet, unsure of whether to follow the noise or pretend they heard nothing. Outside, snow had begun to fall, thin flakes swirling like dust shaken from the rafters of an old lie. By the next morning, the article was online. The headline read, Mother offered family, demanded fortune, the price of a Christmas invitation. By noon, the New York Times had picked it up with their own title, Inheritance or Extortion, One Woman's Silent Stand Against Elder Financial Abuse. My daughter's photo, eyes wide, mouth frozen mid-protest, sat at the top of the piece. Underneath it, the box, open, exposing not just a will, but a truth the world recognized. Love that has to be bought is not love. That night, I received over 100 emails, some from strangers, some from women who had lived the same story, some from nurses, some from social workers, and one from a young mother who had aged out of foster care. She wrote, You didn't give your daughter your fortune. You gave us our dignity. Thank you, Grandma. I cried then, not for what I lost, but for what I finally gave. And for once, the silence inside my house felt full. I moved out of the house 2 weeks after the article ran. I packed what little I needed, 2 coats, 3 sweaters, Henry's Bible, and the photograph of us on our wedding day. The rest I left behind. I had stayed in the house a little while longer, not out of sentiment, but to complete the legal transfer of the deed and finalize the donation paperwork. I slept on the same old mattress, ate from the chipped plates, and watched the wind rattle the back window one last time. When everything was signed, sealed, and handed over to the foundation, I locked the door and walked away. For good. The furniture, the dishes, even the rocking chair I had sat in for so many quiet, aching nights, it no longer felt like home. I donated it all to the foundation, let them furnish a shelter with the things that once held memories. Let someone else's child fall asleep on the couch where mine once cried over scraped knees and first crushes. My new home was a modest community at the edge of the county. Nothing fancy, white curtains, clean hallways, a garden with crooked stepping stones. But it was warm, safe, the kind of place where people called you by your name without expecting anything in return. They called me Grandma Rose. Some of the women there had been forgotten, like I had. Widows, divorcees, quiet souls with too much love and nowhere left to place it. Others were staff, young and tired, but kind. And then there were the children. The community shared its grounds with a children's home, run by the same foundation I had left my money to. Most of the kids had been shuffled through foster care, abandoned by the very people who gave them life. But they were bright, resilient. They still laughed with their whole chests, still made cards out of construction paper and too much glue. That first Christmas, I received 17 handmade cards. "Thank you, Grandma Rose," one of them read in purple crayon, "for not giving up on us." Another, "You made a place for us when no one else would. Now we know we matter." I kept every one. They lined my windowsill, curled at the edges, bright against the pale December sky. I spent my days teaching a few of the girls how to knit. I told bedtime stories to boys who still had nightmares. I baked cookies that were too hard and pies that were too soft, and no one ever complained. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I had money, but because I had finally given it to someone who knew what to do with it. Evelyn's article sparked more than headlines. It sparked outrage. People came forward, other parents, other grandparents, who had been manipulated, coerced, threatened. Organizations began to review elder financial abuse more seriously. Legislators mentioned it by name on the floor of the state assembly. And my daughter? She went quiet for a while. But silence has a way of echoing. The investigation began after a second whistleblow. Her husband's former assistant anonymously submitted a packet of emails, communications that outlined her plan to acquire my assets, to use emotional leverage, to present a public image of reconciliation while orchestrating private demands. Within weeks, her name was in headlines too, but not the way she wanted. Her husband's company lost brand partnerships, investors pulled out, holiday deals were canceled. The photos from that night, her face caught mid-sneer, contract in hand, were shared across platforms with captions like, "Daughter demands millions, gets cut off." I did not watch the news, but people told me. Eventually, the letter arrived. It came in a lavender envelope, written in the handwriting I once loved. "Dear Mom," it began. "I'm sorry." It went on for 2 pages. Apologies, explanations, pleas. She said she had been angry, that she had listened to the wrong people, that she had lost herself trying to become someone else's idea of successful, that she had been wrong. "I miss you," she wrote. "Can we start again?" I held the letter for a long time. Read it 3 times. Let the words bleed into me like a warm bath after a long day in the cold. Then I folded it, placed it in an envelope of my own. Inside, I put one thing: a photograph. It was her, at 3 years old, arms around my neck, her cheek against mine. Her eyes were wide and happy, her mouth frozen mid-laugh. On the back, I wrote, "I once carried you inside me, then I carried you in my heart, for years. Now I carry you in the past." And that was all. I did not need revenge. I had something better. I had peace. In the spring, one of the boys planted a tree in the garden for Henry. He did not know the man, but he said the name made him feel safe. They tied a ribbon around its trunk that said, "Thank you." I sat beneath it every afternoon, reading old poems, watching the wind move through the leaves. Every so often a new child would arrive, scared, quiet, and I would smile and open my arms, because I was no longer invisible, and I would never again beg to be seen. I did not have a daughter anymore. But I had something she never understood. I had a legacy. __________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ The first inciting incident occurred 2 years ago this month, when the bushes underneath Texas were damp. It's raining in Salt Lake City. Stay at work until 2 a.m. Cover the school and a diner ________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________:______________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ If this story found its way into your heart, if you've ever loved in silence, been forgotten by the ones you gave everything to, or risen with quiet dignity when the world tried to write you off, then I hope you'll stay a while. Here, on Grandma True Stories, we remember out loud. We speak for every woman who gave until she had nothing left and still got called selfish. For every mother who was erased and every truth that took years to bloom. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers. And when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.